This is Rabbi Dr. Sid Weinberg, and our weekly podcasts are back. I am with my computer guru, uh, the great E, and today we're going to talk a little bit about E's summer. He's had a wonderful summer. He's traveled quite a bit, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his travels and what he saw. And hopefully you'll find some places that you may want to visit, and E will give you his recommendations about things like where to go and what to see, and maybe even where to stay, as long as it isn't with his family members, because they probably wouldn't like strangers knocking on their door in the middle of the night asking for a room, uh, unless they do that for a living. So, first question is, E went on 2 trips. Which trip did you like the best?
The trip that I liked the best was the one to upstate New York. We started by going to Niagara Falls, and then from Niagara Falls, we drove to Cooperstown, where we went to the Baseball Hall of Fame, and I did a bunch of baseball things there. And then from there, we drove to somewhere else in New York that I can't remember at the second, that I'll probably remember in 5 minutes. And then from that place that I can't remember, now I remember, it's called Jamestown. We went there because my grandma's a big I Love Lucy fan, and there's the I Love Lucy Museum there, because her digital birthplace was Jamestown. And then from Jamestown, we drove to Cleveland, where we went to the Cuyahoga Valley National Park and just had a few days to relax from all of that traveling. And then from there, we went back home, and that was our trip to upstate New York and Cleveland.
You're missing my favorite part of that trip. What other museum did you go to? You went to another Hall of Fame.
Oh yeah. Now I remember. On the way back from Cleveland, Canton, Ohio was only about an hour out of the way. And there's the Football Hall of Fame there. And I'm not a big football fan, but Hall of Fames are generally pretty cool. So on the way, we stopped at the Football Hall of Fame, and the Football Hall of Fame was one of the better Hall of Fames. I went to 3 National Sport Hall of Fames and a couple small other local Hall of Fames for like local athletes. Um, and it was one of the better Hall of Fames, and it was very cool there. And they had a very cool movie theater where the seats spun around, and that was really cool.
Hmm. And of course, you went to visit the Packers section of the Hall of Fame, knowing that I am a big Packer fan and spent 30 years in Green Bay. So I did appreciate the fact that uh, you went there specifically to take some pictures for me. So thank you for that, since I've never been to the Football Hall of Fame. Uh, Now, I have another question for you, and we didn't discuss this earlier, but what did you do for Shabbat?
So I'll do Shabbos for both trips.
Yes.
For Shabbos in Cooperstown, we there was obviously no shul in the middle of nowhere in New York, and there was also obviously no Eruv. So what we did was we just davened, and we also um, did some work, looked at some worksheets for the parsha. So because we couldn't read the Torah, so we just did some other parsha things, and and then in the afternoon, because we couldn't like really like walk to like a friend's house because I don't have friends that live in the middle of nowhere in New York. Um, me, I got this. I had this small baseball game that I played, and a baseball board game that I played, and I read some Harry Potter because I'm a big Harry Potter fan. And then in Columbus, Ohio, which was part of the other trip, where we went to Columbus, Ohio, and Kentucky, and we went to some things in Louisville, Kentucky. We stayed at an Airbnb that was about 10 minutes away, a 10-minute walk away from a shul. And we went to a shul there, and it was a very nice shul. And the Aron Kodesh was like 50 feet tall, and it was one of the coolest Aron Kodeshes that I've ever seen. And on Shabbos, because obviously because I didn't know anybody there, I also read.
And of course, what did you do about kosher food?
For the trip in Cooperstown, we just had to bring a ton of food, and it was hard to find foods that we could like refrigerate and keep for a long time, but we managed to make it work. And also, there were a few stores that we were able to find some kosher food at. And then in Columbus, they don't have it's not the biggest Jewish community, and they don't have any specifically Jewish stores, but the Kroger there was kind enough to have a Jewish bakery in it and a big kosher section.
Very good, because I'm sure some of the people listening to our podcast were kind of wondering how you dealt with all of those issues, because it's not easy, especially when you're in upstate New York and you're not really near anything Jewish. It's pretty funny to think of New York not having Jewish things all over, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because when we think of New York, we think of New York having a lot of Jews, but most of them are concentrated in the city and in the areas just above the city, just around the city. So I know what you mean. I used to live pretty close to the city, and I lived in the city. In the city, there was no problem. So we've talked about your first trip and some of the highlights. I'm assuming that you did not try to go over Niagara Falls in a barrel.
I did not try to go over Niagara Falls in a barrel, but on the Canadian side, which we couldn't go to because of COVID, they actually have a museum about people who went over in a barrel. And actually, the first person to successfully go over in a barrel brought their cat with them. Um, but um, it, but then, so after our trip to New York, we went home. Our grandparents went back to California, and then we went on another road trip to Columbus, Ohio, and Louisville, Kentucky. So on the trip um, to so in Columbus, what we did were we went to a zoo, and I really like sheep, and they had a nice petting zoo, and that was really nice. And we went to some museums, and we went to some rose gardens, and we just drove around and looked at other parts of the Midwest that we don't normally see. And then we drove down um, Kentucky, and um, so what we did for the first day in Kentucky was we went to a I'm bad with words to a cave called the Mammoth Caves.
Right.
And the Mammoth Caves are like huge, and there's a ton of stalactites and stalagmites, and a ton of really cool like columns and pillars, and there was it was just really cool seeing the caves there. And then the next day, we went to a amusement park called Kentucky Kingdom. And then the next day, we went to the Louisville Slugger Bat Factory. Oh, there we got a tour of the factory. And I'm a big Dodger fan. So when we went to the machines that start out the whole process, the tour guide pointed out to me that they were actually making bats for Justin Turner of the Los Angeles Dodgers at the moment. And that was really cool because next year, when I watch the Dodger games, I'll know that I might have seen that bat being made. And we looked at all of the machines, and it was really cool. And when we like in the actual factory, it like felt like a factory, but at the same time, it didn't feel too much like a factory because they had to make it so tourists could also go through so they could make extra money. And then after the tour, which was they had a small museum and we looked at that, and then we went to the gift shop where I got a baseball bat. I got the Youth 125 maple, if you're curious, and I got the half tan and half black version, if you're wondering. I didn't get the full black version. And then we went back to Kentucky Kingdom and we went on some really cool rides.
Now, did your parents go on the rides with you?
No,
No, your
only my
parents did.
dad.
Oh, your dad did.
Yeah.
But your mom was not gonna. Did your sister go on the rides?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Very
me,
good.
my dad, and my sister.
And we haven't really talked about your sister H. We'll call her H. She is 15 and very involved in art, right?
Yeah.
And so when they went on the first trip, they also stopped at the Corning Glass Factory. And I have seen E, pictures of E standing in front of various glass pieces. I think you were even standing in front of a glass sheep. Yes, you were. E's mom sent me that picture so that I could see that you were having a good time. And that you were standing in front of a sheep, which is your favorite animal, besides my cats. So terrific. So if you were going to recommend one place to go from each trip, what would you say to our listeners? What would you say they should go do or see?
I'll start with the second trip, the one that we went to Columbus and Kentucky. And in Columbus, Ohio, they have a great zoo. It's not anything like the San Diego Zoo, but it's like up there. It's like even 1 year beat out the San Diego Zoo as the #1 zoo in the country. And it's a huge zoo and it has some really cool animals, and it's one of and it's really like impressive. And they also have some rides. They have a stingray. They had a really cool sea lion show. Um, and it's just a great zoo. And then on the first trip, I would recommend going to the Baseball Hall of Fame. It's even if you don't really like baseball, it still has like some really cool like things that aren't like very baseball-y. Like it has some things about um, how baseball helped shape like America, like with Jackie Robinson, or and a few other things like Roberto Clemente helped shape um, the nation too. And it's also like they also have like some like mascots there, and it's just a cool place to go and just walk down the streets of Cooperstown and see all of the cool stores that are somewhat baseball related, but also not very baseball related because they also want to sell other things that aren't completely baseball related, but still very baseball related.
Very good. Thank you so much for sharing your trips with us for this summer. You've heard E's recommendations. All of the places that E went to and discussed today are family friendly. They're very interesting, and they're certainly great trips to take if you live in the Midwest like we do, because there's some driving, but in these days of COVID, this is probably the best way to get out of the house and go on a trip. Please note that many of the things, except for the Hall of Fames, are outside. And so, for example, the amusement park, the Mammoth Caves, those are pretty safe areas to be if you're concerned about the spread of COVID. And so, thank you to E for sharing his trip with us. And all I can say is go Dodgers and go Dodgers bats. Okay, thank you so much for listening to us today. Next week, we will be back to some primarily Jewish content. I think we'll talk some more about the Bible. We've been neglecting the Bible course, so we will go ahead and go back to some of that. And so we will be here. I hope that you will be here too. And have a wonderful week.